Well, hello there, Springfield Faith Center, and welcome to another episode of SFC Without Walls, our church podcast. Today we're going to do a take two because we had some technical difficulties yesterday, but this is a take two. But today we have an exciting little segment for you. My name's Brandon. I'm the senior pastor, and all the way over to the left, if you're watching, my left.
I'm Daniel. I'm the associate pastor.
And then to the middle of us.
Yeah.
I'm Bev, and I lead the women's ministry team.
Yep.
And we are excited to have Bev with us today.
Again today.
Yes, again today.
Twice. By technical difficulties, Brandon means that I forgot to turn Bev's mic on yesterday. And so we did a whole recording that didn't work.
I have a smart aleck comment about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that you didn't. Thank you.
Yeah. So we took a few weeks off just because of, just different things, but we're back. We know, interestingly enough, sometimes we're up here and we're like, does anyone ever listen?
Yeah.
And then when we don't do recordings,
we get a lot
of people saying, we listen to those every week. So it's great to know people listen to us.
Yeah.
Thank you out there for listening to us. We like to start off our little podcast with a Beyond Sunday segment where we look at the week before the sermon or the message that was preached, and we like to go beyond that to see how it can apply to our lives. We always ask similar questions. Today, we're going to start by me asking Bev a question. What stood out to you from this past Sunday's message?
I think for me, one of the things that really stood out was the fact that when Jesus did the healing of the paralyzed man.
No,
right?
paralyzed is next week. It's
I'm getting really confused.
We've been having conversations about
the healing of the leper.
Yes.
He not only healed him, he was compassionate towards him, and he touched him, which was really, really taboo at the time. So it was, that to me just shows Jesus' compassion for us, his caring, that he'll go beyond those situations.
Yeah, it was interesting that, Pastor Daniel pointed out that word is translated a bunch of different ways. It can be translated indignant. You could even say furious is a way to talk about it. You could even say compassionate. He had compassion, and that's, I think, the translation that Bev's thinking about there. And it goes down to the core of his guts. It's like a stirring within the core of who he is. And that causes him to move, whether it's mad at his situation, mad at what the disease has done, how it's run its course on this guy, or just the fact that he has been an outcast. And there's that point to where he then moves Jesus to the point where he reaches out and touches the man. So good point there. I think for me, as I look at what stood out, I think one of those take-home points where you were saying basically to practice being aware of your need for God's presence. And I think sometimes for me, so maybe this is more challenging, but obviously the leper is in a point where he is aware that he needs to be close to God. And I love how in Luke's rendition, he says, Lord, if you're willing, you can make me clean. But clearly he knows that God is up to something, or that Jesus has some kind of authority. The news about him is spreading all over the town. But he is aware that he needs God's presence. And, I want to believe that that I could know that about myself way before leprosy has ran its course in my life. A physical, oh wow, no, this is I really do need now to be close to God.
Ignoring that,
But I realize sometimes it does take struggle. It does take a failure in life. It does take sin and being convicted of my sin to realize, wow, I need God's presence. And it shouldn't get to that point. Right. And so I think that's kind of what stood out, and also kind of what challenged me in that, I have to constantly realize, no, I need to be close to God now before I get to that hopeless place where he was.
Well, and I like using the word practice.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just, you didn't just say, be aware. No, you need to practice that.
Yeah.
You need to actually stop and take moments where you do some introspection and see what's going on inside me that I might need to be aware of. I need his touch.
Right. And it does, it takes a degree of work and effort, because for whatever the reason, and I know this isn't unique to me in my situation, but my equilibrium is to be unaware of God's activity in my life. My equilibrium point, my natural point of rest in life, is just to think, here are the bits and pieces of my life, here are the things that I need to get done in the busyness of my day, ready to go. and just to forget that God wants to play a role in those moments, and that he's there, and that I need him to be involved, and that I need him to play his role in those spaces.
And we've talked before about those underlying emotions that we might have,
right,
that we might attribute to somebody else doing something to us,
right,
or some event happening to us, and so we have some underlying anger or anxiety or fear or whatever, and instead of looking at those as those are great signals for us to look towards God and see him in our life, see what we need of him in our life. So
I've had the last couple of days, I've had a bit of a forcible reminder of that, because Monday night and Tuesday night both, I used a different pillow or slept on my pillow wrong, and my
How old are you,
neck,
Daniel?
I'm 41. This is starting to become an issue now, and my neck is killing me. The last couple of days, I don't normally deal with chronic pain at all. It's not a part of my life, thankfully. But the last couple of days, my neck has been in a bad way because of this stupid pillow.
I shouldn't laugh at you. You didn't haul wood.
Nope.
You didn't build something.
I didn't do
you slept on a pillow.
I didn't do anything manly or tough or cool. This was not a well-earned injury at all.
Your brain is getting so large with all that information.
That's what it is.
Just,
That's what it is. And both days afterward, I found myself getting really irritable and grouchy, especially with my kids. And at first I thought, man, are my kids just being super infuriating today? Is this their fault? Are they doing this to me? And then I realized, oh no, it's because I'm in pain. It's because I'm hurting. And the sensation of being in pain is just causing me to be really agitated and aggravated everywhere else. But I didn't notice that. I mean, it should have been right there on the surface, right? But I didn't notice that until I took a minute and stopped and thought, where is this coming from? And tried to trace it back a little bit. And then I realized, oh, it's because my neck's killing me and I'm taking it out on my kids. So
awareness has the ability to change a lot of things in our lives, and just like the perspective on how we're going through things, or just how we've been dealing with things in the past. I mean, awareness is huge, and I think that's another point which you made is kind of similar to that, is trust that God can reach into hopeless circumstances. It's almost like maybe at some point we've lost an awareness that God is still capable of moving or going and working in a hopeless circumstance. And obviously the story, like a man's covered in leprosy, it's almost like a sentence. It's not really like a condition, it's a sentence. Like now you're just going to be there until you die.
Well, because medically at the time there was no way to cure it.
There's no, and limbs fall off, your teeth fall off and all that stuff. It's like, he was in a hopeless place, but I think at some point we get, at least for me, I've gotten to this place where I've at certain times gone beyond the awareness, or like, well, God really just can't work in this, or maybe something that I've prayed through,
right,
and God didn't come through. I prayed for and God didn't come through in the way I wanted to. But like, it's like look at stories like this, and even the next few weeks of like, but he still can. Yeah, he still has the ability.
Right.
I think trusting is best done in community. To like when you can't trust, like having people. I think you were saying it yesterday. Step in and have the faith for you and the trust that you can. So that kind of those two things really challenged me. Bev, did one of the things challenge you from this weekend? I know you mentioned a few things, but okay, can't remember. So Daniel, we like to also ask and kind of turn the discussion back to the person who preached, and we like to ask, what would you have added if you had more time, or maybe what would you have elaborated on?
So it's kind of funny because there's actually a lot this week that got left on the cutting room floor, so to speak. And I actually went and had a conversation with my wife one point, because you mentioned the translation of that one word, compassion versus indignation. There's actually kind of a long conversation to be had regarding that word. And I went back to my wife and I sat down with her and I explained the whole thing. And I vomited a whole bunch of the history of the original manuscripts and the Greek language and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, how interesting is this? How in depth should I go? And her answer was basically, she shook her head and she was like, not at all. Don't.
Honesty.
Right?
Yeah,
it was honesty. So I glossed over that, but there is kind of an interesting conversation to be had there. The one piece that I did almost draw in was talking a little bit more about leprosy itself, specifically as we understand it in the modern era, because the disease, like the narrow understanding of the disease that we have now, what we call Hansen's disease, is a particular bacteria. It was discovered in the late 1800s by a scientist named Hansen. And we understand it a lot more specifically now, but that disease in the modern era is still present, is still an issue. We can cure it medically, but there's still a history to the disease. And interestingly, in the 1900s, there was a particular doctor. I looked up his name today because I knew we were going to re-record. His name's Dr. Paul Wilson Brand. He was an Englishman, and he dedicated his life to not necessarily curing people who were just getting it, but he dedicated his life to regenerating and rehabilitating people who had already been damaged by the disease. So leprosy, or Hansen's disease as we understand it, one of the primary things that it does is it kills the nerve endings across the body. And so you can't feel anything anymore. You lose the sensation of touch. And one of the big complications that frequently comes from that is people suffering from the disease will get injured and be totally unaware of their own injury. They'll get cut, they'll get bruised, they'll get damaged or whatever. And then that will result in further complications that they just don't notice. They miss. They're unaware of, I have a cut here and now it's getting infected. They can't feel it. If you guys have ever seen the movie Kingdom of Heaven from Ridley Scott, came out a decade or so ago. It's like a Crusades era,
Orlando Bloom's.
Yes, exactly. In the movie, the young king of Jerusalem is suffering from leprosy, and that plays a role in his story in the movie, is that he can't get injured because of the danger of it. Anyway, so that whole element was really interesting to me because it draws in back to that issue of him being touched. And Brandon, you mentioned yesterday that for him, if this was leprosy as we understand it, then this would have been the first time he would have felt and experienced touch in who knows how long after having been healed by Jesus in this moment. But the other thing that it draws to mind for me is that doctor, Dr. Paul Brand, he wrote a book in 93 with Philip Yancey about his experience with leprosy and some of the spiritual ramifications of it. And the title of the book is Pain, the Gift Nobody Wants. And it's specifically talking about that idea because he famously said, the greatest gift I can give my patients is the gift of pain, the ability to feel something again. And so his perspective on pain was that it was a gift, that it was there to communicate certain things to us and help us to understand things, even though that is really not how we interact with it most of the time. So there's a whole conversation to be had there about the role of pain in our lives and how it's not as evil as most of us think it is. So
yeah, pain is usually we're like, I don't want pain. I don't want that. But
avoid it.
Even thinking about fitness and exercise, as you work out a muscle, as it contracts and then extends and contracts and extends, you are in a way tearing muscle tissue to build it and make it stronger. So you're gonna have pain and hurt, but it's for the good. You don't want, if you're training for something, you don't want to just be not sore all the time. At some point you want to be sore so your muscles are getting stronger and be able to perform better.
Yeah.
But that's a pain that we're willing to do. But other pains, I don't know. Or some people, they feel one pain from a workout and never do workout again. Yeah.
Well, and one of the things we've talked about before too is the fact that emotional pain we want to avoid. But people who have dealt with severe depression realize the total void of feelings isn't good either.
No, it's
that doesn't
really not.
make you feel good. That the presence of emotional pain can show that we're alive and show us where we can connect with Jesus.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I told the story about the pain in my neck a few minutes ago. And even now I'm realizing that pain is communicating to me that something was wrong.
Yeah.
I was sleeping on a pillow or something was wrong with the way that I was sleeping. And now I can make adjustments and changes. I've got information to work based off of. And even emotional pain is similar in that regard, that it's meant to communicate, hey, something's gone wrong here. We need to adjust something. So
when you buy your new pillow, tell Lindsay to wrap it up for you, put a bow on it. It's the gift to you. The pain of it was now a gift in a new pillow.
We switched pillows last night because she's got one that's a lot thinner, and so I used hers, and she's trying out the one that I got. And
I think Sarah stole mine. I was telling you I had a little crink in my neck, so I think she stole mine, so I switched it back last night when she wasn't paying attention.
Ooh, there you go.
Anyway,
she doesn't listen to this, does she?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, all right.
She's like, I've heard enough of you. in a kind, sweet, convicting way.
Right.
So for the next part of our discussion, we're going to kind of go into one of these questions. It's in our new format of our sermon notes. Inside we have some pretty cool questions that are geared toward our life groups to be able to, again, do what we're doing now, but do it in a group format to hear more voices and really to grow deep spiritually. But one of the questions I think is cool because it allows us to put ourselves in the story. I think one of the ways we can most grow, and like we can grow into Christ likeness most, is by putting ourselves in these Bible stories and seeing how like Jesus would still respond similar to us. But the point here is that the leper in the story was an outcast, as you write here in the notes, someone who was not permitted to socialize freely. Because back then, going to synagogue, going to temple to offer sacrifices, that was like the social marker. If you were able to do that, you were able to be in society. Those who were unclean had to stay away from those things.
Prevented from doing that.
Yeah, and Leviticus says that he was unclean. He had to tell people he was unclean. His hair had to show everyone that he was unclean. His clothes were definitely unclean.
Had to tear his clothes.
He had to live outside. So he's, by definition, an outcast. And it said, would you be willing to share a time when you felt something similar? And I'll start with this one. It's interesting with this passage, because I love teaching this passage, the next one, and there's like three or four stories in Mark and Luke that kind of go back and forth, or one after another, that are pretty fun to teach. And when in August of 2020, I tested positive for COVID, and I had all the symptoms, and this was, again, 5 or 6 months before any vaccine had come out. And so I had all the symptoms, lost my taste, lost my sense of taste, a sense of smell. I had a really bad sore throat for a week, those kinds of things. But what I noticed is, like, in a way, we were treated by people as if we had leprosy.
Yeah.
And it was almost like a sentence, like, you have COVID, like, here's your sentence, and you jokingly said, we know what, well, not jokingly, just like, now we know what quarantine, we can relate to him in that way. But I felt like the response from people was almost as if, we were walking the streets in Jerusalem where people would go on the other side of the road because, there's a leper, we need to move to the other side. And I felt like at some points, I even remember telling Sarah, saying, I just feel like we have leprosy and people are treating us differently. And so I just want to put out there to everybody, like, contracting a virus doesn't make you a leper, or doesn't make you like we contract viruses all the time. We have no idea how we do, and we should never be dehumanized into that feeling. But I definitely could. And I remember using the words, man, I feel like the leper in Mark chapter 2, just, you stay away. And, and I was thinking, man, I can't even see my parents for the next, so many days. And they wanted to see our kids, and they can't see my kids. And it was just like, this is really weird. Yeah. And so I definitely had that feeling of outcast, stay away. Felt the label.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you used that word, dehumanizing, actually, because I feel like that's a good word to keep in mind in moments like that, because there's a difference between appropriate medical caution and a dehumanizing sense of rejection that happens. Because when I mentioned this on Sunday, that when you're talking about leprosy, it's easy to point fingers at the Jewish communities and the children of Israel at this point for their treatment of folks with leprosy, but it's not unique to them. Every major human civilization has had to deal with this disease at some point, and they've all treated it in similar ways. Even today, in the modern areas of the world that are still dealing with Hansen's disease, they have leper colonies where people are forced out and they have to live in these communities away from the regular community, and they deal with this same issue of dehumanization. It's not just a sickness or a disease. It's now that you have it, you're somehow less than human. You're not a normal person. There's a devaluing that happens. And you're right, that's completely inappropriate when we're talking about, people getting sick or whatever, whether it's COVID or whether it's, we mentioned yesterday that the AIDS epidemic in the 80s and the 90s, something similar happened. Yeah. And that boundary line between, because even today, like, one of the things that I was reading is that modern humanitarian medical groups dealing with people who've got leprosy, of course, they're going to take appropriate medical caution. They're going to guard themselves against how the disease is transmitted. But one of the biggest areas that they have to combat is the effects of this long-term sense of dehumanization that the societies these people have been cast out of consider them less than human, consider them, somehow other, and they want to keep them socially separate. And they talk about how it's actually medically speaking, it's relatively easy to cure the disease and even to rehabilitate it to somewhat, but rehumanizing the society that has pushed them away is much more difficult. And that, I think, Brandon, there's a lot of similarity there in what you're talking about.
Well, I think recently, especially with the COVID, it's not necessarily that people are doing it intentionally.
Right.
But it's just maybe the body language, or just the fact that for some reason, only in America does not only in America, but it seems to be heightened in America that an illness becomes a political issue or a virus becomes a political issue. Yeah. But like, you know, when people tell me they have COVID, the first thing I do now because of that situation is I say, "Oh, are you okay? Are you feeling okay?
Yeah.
Like, do you need anything?" Right. Not like, "Oh, well, you know, like start freaking out and start going like, you know." So because I do how that felt. Yeah. And like I didn't want it. It wasn't like, you know, touching everything dirty that I could. Like we were doing everything everyone else was doing.
Licking doorknobs.
Yeah, it was not licking doorknobs. Yeah. We were just doing everything everyone else does, and we just got it. And so, but I could definitely feel at a certain level, obviously not. You know,
it's not exactly the same situation, but it's pretty similar.
But feeling outcast doesn't ever feel good.
Right.
So
right.
I can relate to that.
Yeah.
Luckily, my wife was with me, so it was like we're outcast together.
Outcast together. Yep.
Kids, get over here. But if it was me by myself, that would have been.
That would have been rough. Yeah. Exactly. Bev, what about you? That question: have you ever felt like an outcast before?
Not really, like by a group of people. The only thing I can relate is. Earlier in my career, when I worked with special ed kids and just as a support to teachers for kids with learning disabilities, and so I worked in a classroom setting, and I was not the certified teacher. I was a classified employee, which was to their monetary benefit because I was a cheap teacher.
Right.
But there was one particular person that I worked with that really had this hierarchy of who people were in a school setting.
Yeah.
And in fact, I remembered her talking to the teacher I worked with and would not use my name. She would only say your aide. It was bizarre. And the teacher I worked with was livid because we worked as a team.
Yeah.
And we kind of team taught, but it was just a very odd feeling of, really, you treat me like this because I don't have the title of a certified teacher.
Right.
Yeah, it was very odd, but it was disconcerting at the time. So.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Anytime you feel other than or
less valued,
yeah, it definitely weighs on you.
Right.
Especially when, like in that case, like you all are doing the same thing, working with the same students. Right. Like, yeah, the person has a different role and maybe it pays a little bit more, but like it doesn't make them like better of a human. You know? No. I think one of the antidotes to all this stuff is a good old fashioned dose of humility.
Yeah.
You know, like humility goes a long way.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, I have this degree or this place in life, or maybe, I don't have an illness you have, but like I can be humble and realize it isn't about me, and maybe it's about you this time. How can I serve you?
Yeah, yeah. My experience with that being that kind of an outcast is a little bit less serious than either of yours. But I think back to my experience in school and just dealing with like social cliques and castes and things like that in school. And I was fortunate that I never had to deal with, a lot of the bullying situations that some students do. I made out okay in most of that, but I was a band.
You're 6'4", dude.
That's true. I'm a pretty big guy. It takes some guts to bully me.
A really insecure person to pick on you.
That's not to say that nobody ever did it.
No,
because,
I got you.
When I was in elementary school, there were a couple
little
of
guys who pick on the bit.
Yeah. Sorry. But through most of junior high and high school, I was a band geek. I played French horn, which is an awesome instrument, but is not necessarily a cool instrument, if there's any such thing.
You play the guitar now.
I do play the guitar now, yeah.
And I would argue with you on my sister's behalf. The French horn is the coolest instrument in the whole band.
That's right.
My dad brags about it, so there's some connection there.
Absolutely. So played
Maybe y'all can play together someday.
Yeah, played the French horn for like 6 years. Really, really enjoyed it. But so there was a large degree to which that became my social circle, the other band kids. But I also played a lot of sports at the same time. And there were moments where it felt like this sort of like tension or conflict between the cool kids and the not cool kids, and there was a degree of feeling like kind of an out. I still remember one of my fondest memories is the first touchdown I ever scored when I was on the varsity football team my junior year, and there was another kid in the band who was on the team with me, one of our linemen. And he came and tackled me in the end zone, and he was like, "Yeah, that's right, band nerds rule, Lanning." Yeah, and it was like a good moment of bonding. So, Greg Meller, if you're listening to this, probably not, but if you are, that was you. I still remember. So, anyway,
I respect that.
It was a good moment.
It's interesting you say that because we were talking yesterday. Is like I played football, and like to me, high school football equals a game with a band. And if there's no band, it doesn't feel like
something's missing.
So I was like, man, I'm so glad we have a cool band that's huge. Like they were, they'd take the whole field up with their marching band, and they had their own section. I loved coming out hearing the drums as you make a tackle, and they played like the theme song or whatever. And you're just like, man, for me, football without a band isn't football.
They really go together well.
Yeah. So it's interesting. I never looked at band members like that. I was always like, man, I can't play that instrument. I don't get to go on those vacations. Those are cool.
I never did either because I was playing the sports. I always had to stay home and then go to the games, and the rest of the band got
smelly bus.
Right? They were smelly. You're right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think at some level, everyone in life, unless you're like have really cool, not outcast privilege, maybe you haven't experienced it, but yeah, at some level, like we all humans at some level can experience that, and yet it's here in this story that Jesus is saying, it's like the kingdom of God comes to people who are outcasts, comes to those who we would probably otherwise have canceled out or thought that they didn't qualify, and yet it comes to them. And next week we're going to see it again. This coming Sunday, see the kingdom of God come to someone else like that.
Yeah.
Great segment. As we kind of finish off, let's do a fun one. I think we like to have a little bit of fun here, but we're going to go with another question that's on our life group notes. But if you had the opportunity to be on any TV game show, past or present, which one would you most want to be on?
I will happily go first. So Jeopardy is on there. I would probably take Jeopardy. I don't know that I would be very good at it, but I love the random trivia and just trying to soak up random pieces of knowledge. It's a favorite of mine. So
I like how they they very frequently include something on the Bible.
That's true. That happens a lot.
And I'm always like, I'll take the Bible for 1,000. Let's start off deep. I think for me, is The Price is Right.
Yeah.
I don't remember as a kid at like 10 a.m., Bob Barker would come on. They have that music, and I just want to hear my name. Come on down. You're the next contestant on The Price is Right. And I want to guess that cat litter, and I want to go all the way. I was telling you guys yesterday, I do a lot of the shopping just because it's easier when the kids are asleep for me to go at night and just get a bunch of stuff, or I eat the most out of my family, so I better buy the most for myself, buy for our family the most. Anyway, and now I think I could actually do pretty well because I see all the prices, and I'm like, oh, no, that's not a good price for chicken. We were passing that up. Sarah, it's funny. She's like, why aren't we getting chicken? I'm like, it is a $2.19 here. I can get it at $1.87 at the other store. She's like, you're silly. It's $3. I'm like, yeah, well, it adds up. It adds up. We get an extra head of lettuce with that or something. Exactly. Extra avocado these days. Oh, jeez. They're like 3 for $5, depending on where you go.
I don't think I've ever bought avocados my whole life before.
They're always cheaper at Walmart or Winco, but they're so small there.
Oh, are they?
Yeah.
Oh. Well,
Brandon sends my sisters and I
you can tell
pictures of his Albertsons receipts to tell us how much he's saved.
I think one day I got 100% because I got a free reward. So I saved $1 on a $1 item.
Oh my
It was like a
gosh,
pastry
it's
or
kinda
something.
there you
pathetic.
go.
I know. I'm going to send one to you tonight now after I go.
Do it. Yeah.
I think mine isn't on the list because old game shows. It would be a word game.
Yeah.
It'd be like Password, or what's funny is one that was a pyramid, but it started out as a $20,000 pyramid. That was a big deal. I don't think
$20,000.
Yeah,
$20,000
$20,000 was the top
anymore.
prize.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it'd have to be something to do
Who
with
wants
words.
to be a $20,000 heir?
Yeah. I feel like if you go on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it's like easy to get to 32,000.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like,
And then
That's
take
when it
it and
starts
run.
ramping up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just what I say.
if I ever go on there, I'm going to use my lifeline the first question. They're like, what are you doing? I like to live dangerously. Pull the audience.
Nice. You do that. So
wow. All right. Well, that was fun. Pastor Daniel, will you finish this off today by reading a little portion of the book of Mark, chapter 1?
Yeah, chapter 1. I'm going to read verses 40 through 42. A man with leprosy came and knelt in front of Jesus, begging to be healed. "If you are willing, you can heal me and make me clean," he said. Moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. "I am willing," he said, "be healed." Instantly, the leprosy disappeared and the man was healed.
All right. We'll see you guys next time.
Have a good one.